Welcome to this afternoon's training session, which is all about using Instagram for business. And specifically, we're going to be looking at the difference between reels and stories and posts. These are the three main ways of posting on Instagram right now. And unless you're very familiar with Instagram, frankly, it can be quite confusing. Which option do I choose? Which option does what? Which is the best way to go forward? Why do some people opt for stories versus reels versus posts? And well, anyway, the point of this session is to try and demystify some of that. The point of this session is to try and take some of the confusion away, to give you a better understanding of the difference between these three main posting options. Firstly, before we get started, let's just do a bit of background housekeeping, as it were. So welcome, my name is Andrew Knowles. You'll find me on social media at Andrew Explainer, typically on Instagram and LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook. I often use the hashtag Andrew Explains, and certainly if you want to tweet or post about any of my training, you want to use the hashtag Andrew Explains, that would be great. Thank you very much. And I'm running this today as a free online training course, and I'll also be putting it onto YouTube later. It may be that you're watching it on YouTube afterwards. So why do I run these free training courses? I typically run these courses once a month, and you can find out more about the courses that I'm running by going to my website, andrewknowles.co.uk. Why do I run these free courses? Well, because I know that small business owners, the owners of small businesses, people who are busy working away at their business, don't have a lot of time, and they certainly don't necessarily have a lot of funds to invest in training. So I'm contributing to them, to their efforts, by providing these free online courses, which are an opportunity to learn about specific topics relating to social media and marketing, but also an opportunity to ask questions. And if you have questions, then please ask them in the chat. So let's go forward with today's session. And most of today's session is going to be based upon, be driven from the iPhone. So I'm going to actually log in now on my iPhone. So let me do that. So I'm going to end the screen share. And you're now looking at my iPhone. So for the rest of the session, I'm going to be using the iPhone as the main screen for talking about the differences between these different types of activity that you can perform on Instagram. Okay, so Instagram has been around for a long time, a good few years. Instagram is part of the Facebook family of apps, and Instagram has lots of different features and functions. And as I've already said, it can be confusing because you can post images and you can post video onto Instagram. You can also post images and video via the story function, and also you can post video via the Reels function. So as I said, the purpose of this session is to help take away some of the confusion around all of these things. So let's take a look. So let's talk about posts to start with. So posts are the original way of putting posts, pictures, video onto Instagram. Back in the day when Instagram was new, I'm guessing you couldn't even post a video. All you could do was post pictures. And Instagram became known for the high quality of images that people were posting. People would curate their photos and create these wonderful images to capture something about lifestyle, something about their business, about their products. And when you go into Instagram, that is still what you're presented with. Initially, you're presented with a news feed which contains those posts, and it contains the posts from people that you're following. So posts are typically pictures and video, and sometimes the pictures are in a carousel format. That is to say, there's more than one image in each post. So for example, this post that we've got on the screen right now that we're looking at, badge the ICAEW, it's an accountancy organization. By the way, the account that I'm using to run this training session is a test account. It's a training account. I only use it for running events like this and for when I'm testing out features. So it doesn't relate to anything specific. It's a bit of a random collection of content rather than being highly curated. So what you're looking at here on the screen is the most recent post that Instagram has chosen to show me, which is a whole row of people sitting on benches representing a chartered accountants organization. And I can tell this is a carousel post because there are 4 little dots underneath the images. The left-hand dot has got a little blue, is colored blue, and the other 3 dots to the right of that are gray. And that tells me there's a carousel. And if I just put my finger on the screen, I can just move across. And there we are. You can see they've actually connected a couple of photos together so that it looks like there's a double photo. There are 2 photos. They're actually 2 individual photos, but are have been sliced in such a way that when they're put side by side, it looks like one continuous photo, which is quite clever. So, and if I go down the news feed, so I just scroll, put my finger on the screen and go up, you can see there's other posts here. There's a sponsored post there. That's an advert from expert.marketing.uk. And if I scroll further down, there's another post there from the Botanical Candle Company. And that post is, you can see that popped up on the screen there. If I put my finger back on the screen, then there are some tags there. This is a shoppable post. There's a little shopping bag symbol in the bottom left-hand corner so that I can actually click on one of these items and it will take me through to the website where I can actually buy one of these things. So all of these are posts. These are the traditional posts that you would use on Instagram. Some posts are video posts. Let's just scroll down a bit further. And there are some suggestions here, suggestions that I've people I might want to follow. And I'll keep scrolling further down. Oh, here we are. Here's a video post. In fact, it's a reel. I'm going to cover reels shortly. So again, there's another static post. And there's an advert, but that advert's got video on it. So it's an example of, if you like, of a video post. In this case, it happens to be an advert, but the principle's the same. So posts. Posts are the traditional way of putting things onto Instagram. And a lot of people still choose to go down the news feed on Instagram and look at the various posts that come through. And what distinguishes posts, of course, is that they have a strong image. They always have to have a picture or a video. And then below that, you have the option to add a caption, some text, and put hashtags. And hashtags are vital to being found on Instagram. I'm actually running, my next training session that I'm running in early May is actually all about hashtags, explaining how hashtags work and explaining how you can use hashtags for your business. Hashtags apply across more than one social media system. They're not just on Instagram, they're also on Twitter and LinkedIn, and they're also now on Facebook as well. So that session covers hashtags in general rather than specifically Instagram. But of course, Instagram is the network where hashtags are still really important to search particularly. So that's the first of the 3 different types of posts that you get on Instagram, which is posts. The terminologies can be a bit confusing because stories and reels have their own name, but posts don't really have a name. Posts are just posts. But reels are also a type of post and stories are also a type of post. So terminology, you can trip over the terminology sometimes. I'm sorry about that, but that's just the way it is. So I'm going to go back to the profile now. So this is the profile for the account that I'm using. As I said, this is a test account or a training account. So it's entirely random, it's entirely meaningless. And on the profile, so if someone goes to your profile on Instagram, they'll see something that looks similar to this. And at the bottom of the profile, there's the grid. And this grid is the grid of posts. So this is where posts will appear as well. So they'll appear in the newsfeed, but also when someone comes to look at your profile, they'll be presented with your posts as the sort of default option. And you can see the posts with the most recent one in the top left, and then they go across and down the page. So the second of the three types of posts that we're talking about on, or activity that we're talking about on Instagram are stories. And stories, well, stories are inspired by Snapchat. You may well have heard of Snapchat. It was an app that, well, it's still around, but it's an app that was particularly popular a few years ago, particularly with young people. Actually, most of these apps, when they first come out, they're popular with young people, as indeed Instagram was. But as time goes by, businesses get involved, marketers get involved, and the slightly more mature people get involved, and the young folks move on to another system. So The second option we're going to look at here is those stories, which are inspired by Snapchat. And the whole point about Snapchat was that the images were very short life. People could post a picture and the picture would be on the screen for literally just a few seconds. I think it was about 10 seconds or even possibly less. And then it was gone. There wasn't necessarily a record. It wasn't necessarily captured anywhere. It was very ephemeral content. It was very in the moment content. And stories were Instagram's response to that. And stories appear in slightly different places. So if I go back to the news feed here, so this is, if I go to the top of the news feed, so this is typically what you see when you first go into Instagram. And you can see the post that we looked at earlier on with the accountants, and it's telling me there were some more posts that have come in now below that, so I can scroll if I want to. But at the top, there are the 4 little circles, and they represent stories. And the first one on the top left, it says your story. So there's an opportunity for me to create a story. Now, I'm not going to be creating stories as part of today's session. I do a separate session where we go through how to create a story. But some people consume content, that is to say, they spend their time on Instagram, and one of the first places they will go is stories. So let's do that now. So I'm going to tap on the first story, the ICAEW story there, where you've got that sort of circle at the top there with the orange circle around it. That tells me that there's the circle is the profile, the ICAEW, with a sort of a figure of the woman holding it. Well, it looks like she's holding a giant pair of scissors, actually. I don't think it's meant to be a giant pair of scissors. But the orangey circle around that tells me there's a new story from them. So I'm just going to tap on that, and it will fire up the story screen. And I'm going to put my finger on the screen and hold it, because stories play automatically. So one of the big differences between posts and stories is that posts, you have to scroll through posts yourself. Stories, you don't have to do anything. You can just sit and watch them one after another. And there are little white bars at the top. If I take my finger off the screen there, and you see it's jumped picture, and there are little white bars across the top. And you can have multiple stories. Well, each one is called a story, I suppose. So you can have multiple stories live at a time. The big difference between stories and posts is that we talked about the fact that it's ephemeral content, it was inspired by Snapchat, is that stories only last for 24 hours and then they're gone. So they're much more in the moment. Now, in this case, what's happened here is that this particular account, the ICAEW, is actually sharing posts from other people. And this is where it can get confusing, because you can put posts onto Instagram and then you, or indeed somebody else, can share your post into a story. So you're combining the 2 different types of activity. So this is a post, which is now being shared into a story, which frankly is a lazy way of creating a story. But there we are. And I'm going to take my finger off the screen now. It's just I'm just going to allow it to run through the next few stories, and we'll just see where it goes. I don't know what's coming up, because stories are of the moment, and then once they're gone, they're gone. I can go back to them if I want to, but I won't in this case. So take my finger off the screen. You see the white line across the top, and we're going to move on. And here we are. Oh, come to an advert now. So you get ads in all of these things as well. Just let the adverts scroll by, and then we're getting into somebody else's post. This is from Membership Geeks, and just allow that one to go by. And you can see there's some animation on there. Okay, I'm going to put my finger on the screen again, because one of the points about stories is you can add lots of stickers to what's going on. You can add lots of elements to it. You can put video on there. There's a whole range of things you could do. And typically stories are only displayed for a few seconds, maximum about 15 seconds. And that can be too short a time to actually take in all the information that's being displayed. So what you can, as I'm doing here, you can put your finger on the screen to pause it, but not necessarily everybody does. So you have to accept the fact that stories are fast-paced, fast-moving, and people won't always take in everything they're looking at. So again, I should jump on to, let's let go of that. We've got another advert here. Now, if you want to skip past something, you just tap on the left-hand side, right-hand side of the screen, sorry, tap on the left-hand side to go backwards. So this is another story. This is from Anne Hanley, who's a marketing person in the States. And she's just showing pictures of pizza, and you can see she's put some stickers on there. She's tagging people. Stories are meant to be fun. They're meant to be in the moment. They're not meant to be something that you spend hours creating. You know, great way of using stories is to use them on the go. So if you use stories to capture something of a diary of your day, as it were. But remember, they will only last for 24 hours and then they're gone. well, actually, they're not really gone. There's an option in settings where you can turn on archiving, and archiving will save all of your stories in Instagram, and then you can go back and use your stories as what are called highlights. Again, this is where it can get confusing if you're not familiar with how all this stuff works, because you've got posts, you've got stories. The difference between them is stories are short life and posts are forever, effectively, although you can delete posts. But even stories which are short life, you can save them, and although other people can't get back to them, you can still access them again, and you can reuse them as what's called a highlight. So we'll look at highlights in just a moment. So I'll just leave this to run for a moment. So again, just running through other stories. That's yet another advert. It says advert, it says sponsored at the top. So there's a lot of adverts in here. Then we're into a Dorset tea story. And you see this is really fast moving. Okay, so I'm going to put my finger on the screen here now and just hold the image on this one, just while I talk about, finish, I'll talk about stories really. So they are fast moving. Now, a lot of the stories we've seen today are actually quite boring because people have got lazy, and what they're doing is they're simply posting, they're forwarding their posts into stories, which frankly is quite a lazy way of doing it. This is a better example of someone, I mean, it's just daily life, isn't it? Someone's out with the child and they're out with their dogs and they're just showing a bit of video, and they've got the white bars going across the top. They've got several elements to their story. I'm going to jump forward a bit just by tapping on the right hand side of the screen, and there we are. And let's get on to the next bit, and then so we're into more stories. And stories will just play and play and play indefinitely. And I've stood beside people at events and things, just watching them as the stories just scroll by, because they don't have to do anything, they can just consume it. So when's a good time to use stories? Well, a good way to use stories is to use them as a way of documenting, behind the scenes stuff, documenting something about daily life. The nature of stories typically is that they're more informal and that they're more relaxed, and they are certainly in the early days of stories, you had the really strong contrast. Most of the pictures being shared on Instagram were highly curated and were very sort of artistically, aesthetically pleasant, whereas stories were much rougher around the edges and much more fast moving. That sort of changed to a certain extent because the whole authentic and slightly more relaxed approach to posts, to the images, is also now applied to posts. A lot of those aren't so artistic anymore. And also, some of the, we've already talked about it, people sharing the posts into stories. So stories have got to a certain extent a bit boring quite often. That's not to say that you shouldn't use them, but it's just to be aware of the fact that they're less popular than they were, I would say, simply because sadly the marketers have got in there. Those of us who do marketing, we've got in there and we've spoiled it, as often the way marketers can spoil things. It's like filling it with ads. I mean, who wants to see ads every other story? That's not really why people want to go into stories. Anyway, so I'm going to come out of there. So I'll just press the X in the top right-hand corner. And now we're back at the news feed, the main feed for Instagram. So that's stories. Now, I said stories also, that they're ephemeral, they have short life, but they can be given an extended life as highlights. And where would you see highlights? Well, let's go to a profile. So I'm going to go to, actually, I'm going to go to the ICAEW profile. So I'm just going to tap on the little woman with the giant scissors image there, and it's taken me to the profile of the ICAEW. I was a chartered, no, I wasn't chartered. I was a certified accountant, but I was an accountant many, many years ago in my early days of business. And that sort of circuitous route brought me into marketing and social media and training. So back in the day, I was involved in the world of accounting. So you can see here, there's a whole row of circles across the middle of the screen, different colors. They've all got the same figure in them, but they're all different colors. And they've got titles, burden, competitions, ACA, well-being, diversity. And what these are called highlights. And highlights is where you can give stories a new lease of life. So as I said, stories only 24-hour lifespan typically, but on your account, you could then bring stories back into life as a highlight, and they can live forever. So if I just tap on, let's tap on well-being, for example, which is the green one in the middle. And again, that opens the story screen, and I put my finger on the screen just to pause it. So you can see that this is a story. just like the stories you've already seen. There's some imagery, there's some text. And one of the great things about stories is that you can put stickers, all sorts of stickers and things onto a screen to make it look a bit more interesting. You can tag people, you can use hashtags, that sort of thing. Take my finger off, and then it says at the top 107W. Take it off again, right? 102W. What that 102W tells me is that this story was actually posted 102 weeks ago. That's like 2 years ago. So stories are short life, but when you put them back into a highlight, they can live forever, just like your Instagram posts. And you can choose which stories you want to put into your highlights. You do need to post them first as a story, but once they've lived their life as a story, or at the moment you create them as a story actually and post them as a story, they can then go into highlights. So it's another way of using stories. Okay, so I'm going to come out of this. Again, press the X in the top right. Hang on, don't open the Zoom screen now. So we've talked about posts and stories, and the difference between the two is very much the posts are the traditional way of posting onto Instagram, and stories are the short life, and they're more fun and they're more relaxed. And then along came Reels, and Reels were inspired very much by TikTok. So TikTok sprang up a few years ago. I don't know if you're familiar with TikTok, but it's very fast moving. I mean, talk about stories being fast moving. TikTok's even more fast moving, and they're all video based, and very often there's music and a music element to it, and they're short. Typically 15-30 seconds. Actually, you can now create a reel of up to a minute, but they are fast paced. And again, difference between stories and reels is that stories, as I said, have this short life, 24 hours typically, although you can recycle them as highlights, whereas reels are like posts in that they will effectively last forever. And all of these things, by the way, posts and reels and stories, when you create them in Instagram, you do have the option to also post them into Facebook. Instagram and Facebook are the same organization. They're all part of Meta. You're probably aware of that, just to be clear about that. And you can have a Facebook page for your business or your organization on Facebook, obviously. And you have the option when you're setting up your Instagram or afterwards to connect your Instagram to your Facebook. So Instagram knows which Facebook page to post to. And then every time you post a reel or a story or a post, you're given the option to post it into Facebook as well. So that you can post these things across both networks. Okay, so let's look at reels now. So I'm going to go back to home. So this is the news feed or the main feed for the account that I'm looking at. We've still got that row of smiling accountants displayed there. And where would I find reels? So stories are across the top. Posts are in the main news feed that you can scroll up and down like so. There we are. Stories are across the top. That's where you'll typically find the stories across the top, those circles. And reels, well, to find reels, and again, this is confusing. I appreciate the navigation can be confusing. It's just the way that Instagram's evolved, to be honest. And these things do keep moving around and changing. So you may find you go into Instagram one day and it's a bit different. It's just the way of it. Where do you find reels? Well, typically you'll find reels down at the bottom of the screen, and there are the 5 icons across the bottom of the screen there. And the middle one, the sort of clapperboard symbol with the play, that is a reel. That is the reel symbol. So I tap on that, and this takes me to reels. Now, reels immediately start playing a video, and let's just keep this one going. And there we are. Put my finger on the screen to pause it, because some reels are really short, so you can have a reel of up to a minute. And this one is just going to loop and loop and loop indefinitely until we move on. Come check this. 1, 2, 3. So there, I'll jump to the next reel now. And just like stories, there's an endless supply of reels. You do have to choose to move between them. So unlike stories where you can, where they just play automatically, you have to jump from one to the other just by scrolling up the screen. But they said there's an endless supply of them. And as with posts and as with stories and reels likewise, there's an algorithm which decides what to show you. So the intelligence inside Instagram is trying to decide what it is that you are interested in, and it will show you stories or posts or reels based upon what it thinks is relevant to you. So that will look at things like who it is that you're already following, the sort of accounts that you engage with, the sort of things that you search for. All of that will feed into the algorithm. So you think, well, this is the sort of stuff that this account is interested in. So for my business account, I'm going to see lots of stuff relating to a small business. Likewise, actually this one, because this account I use for training, and typically I'm looking around stuff for small business. So that's what's coming. Now, reels don't have to contain fast moving video, and they don't have to contain music, but most of them do. That's the reality of it. And there are tools for creating reels, and people can spend quite a long time, invest time in constructing a reel. So stories are short life, and stories are meant to be of the moment. And stories, you're not really meant to spend a long time creating a story, because it's only the last 24 hours. I wouldn't recommend spending a long time creating a story for 24 hours. If you're going to have a story which you're deliberately creating to use it as a highlight, in which case it will last for longer, then you might want to invest a bit more time in it. But reels, some people spend an awful lot of time creating a reel. And right now, where are we? We're in April 2022. Right now, reels are seemingly preferred by the algorithm. So the reels are the format of the moment. So if you want to get into what's on trend right now, then you want to be looking at creating reels.
Photo shoot. Pause.
I think you should treat yourself. I know you were thinking about it, and you were like, oh, I don't know, do it.
So yeah, so that's a reel which is there's no audio on that. I'm not sure whether the audio is coming through onto the live, or indeed it's coming through onto the recording, but certainly this particular one just has somebody speaking and talking about the cookies rather than actually playing some slightly annoying music. Reels, just like regular posts on Instagram, also have the option to add a caption to them. So stories, you can't add a caption. Again, talk about the differences between them. Posts, you add a caption and you add hashtags, and the hashtags very much aid the search. Likewise, reels, when you create a reel, you can add a caption, and also you can add hashtags into that, which will very much drive search. Whereas stories, there is no option to add a caption. You simply put stuff on the screen. You saw the stories earlier on.
I think you should treat yourself.
And this one will just loop and loop and loop. But if you look at the bottom of the screen, unfortunately, the information disappears. And I take my finger, put my finger on the screen to pause it. But you can see at the bottom of the screen, it indicates the music that's being used, or the audio that's being used. In this case, it's the original audio when the reel was filmed, I'm guessing. Or you could record the audio separately and then overlay it using a separate app. And there's also the start of the caption down there. Let's take my finger off the screen and see what else is down
I know you were thinking about it, and you were like, oh, I don't know, do it.
Yeah, so it's telling me also which account, Instagram account, this particular reel is coming from.
I think you should
and I can choose to follow it. There's a follow button down there. And right now, so reels are very popular in the algorithm. So if you want to be looking to get more followers, then it's worth investing in creating some reels. Some good quality reels that will get attention. And reels will, let's come out of reels now. So I'm going to go back to home. So yeah, so back to the main news feed, the home. You can tell you're on home, by the way, on Instagram, because the little house icon in the bottom left-hand corner is in dark. That means you're on the home screen. So you're at the top of the news feed for your particular account. And where else can you see reels? So, okay, so I went into reels there by pressing that middle button down at the bottom there, and that showed me a whole series of reels based on what the algorithm is showing me. But what happens if I want to go and see someone's specific reel? So let's go into let's go into Fish and Fritz Weymouth, which is the account that happens to be displayed here. So I'm going to just tap on the Fish and Fritz Weymouth icon, profile icon, and this takes me into their profile. And looking down here, I can see the profile grid. So I can see the grid with the images from their posts. And then there's a video, there's the play symbol in the middle there. Well, the play symbol, don't confuse the play symbol in the middle there at the top with the reels icon down at the bottom, because they're not the same thing. Remember, you can post videos onto posts in the same way you can put pictures onto posts. And that play icon, slightly confusingly, is actually showing me all of their video posts. These are all the video posts that have been shared by Fish and Fritz. And then the third icon, the head and shoulders in the box icon, is a tags icon. So in fact, Fish and Fritz haven't got any reels. So I can't look at their reels. There isn't a reels icon across the top there in that row of 3. So I need to go and find somebody else. So I should go into here, and I'm just going to pick, let's pick East Dorset Foodie. No, okay. Let's pick up Dorset Food Network, and no, okay. And I'm going to pick up Moonfleet. This isn't doing very well, is it? Right, no, okay. That's not massively successful. What I'm going to do now is I will go back to my own profile, because I know that there are reels on the profile for this training account. They're completely random, they're complete rubbish, but there are reels there. So you can see now we're at the top of the grid for my own account. There are 5 icons going across. So the other ones we looked at just now, there are only 3 icons going across. So there are 5 icons. The first one, the grid icon, is the posts. The second icon, the clapperboard with the play symbol, is the reels. Then you've got the play symbol alone, which is videos. Then you've got a couple of other options. The fourth one going across there, that's for guides. I'm not talking about guides in today's session. Guides aren't a post. Guides are a way of curating other people's posts. I'm not seeing guides being talked about very much on Instagram, so I'm not really sure that many people are using them. And then the 5th icon across is the tagging. Tells you where you're being tagged. Anyway, it's reels that we want to look at. So I'm going to tap on the reels, and there we are. Those are the reels that I have posted on this account, and it's telling me how many times they've been viewed. So the most recent reel, the guy with the chainsaw, it's actually my brother chainsawing my tree, or tree was in the garden. It's been viewed 3,493 times. And if I scroll further down, you can see, yeah, the very first reel in the bottom right-hand corner was viewed a whole 4 times. That's pretty low. In my experience, is that any half decent reel these days, if you've got a decent audience, you should be getting 1,000 views plus. Now, of course, 1,000 views doesn't mean 1,000 followers. It doesn't necessarily mean anything other than the fact that it's been viewed 1,000 times, or whatever, however many times. Really, the separate issue there is, how are you using reels to get more followers, to get more visibility, to promote your business? And that's really beyond the scope of what we're talking about today. What we're talking about today is really just helping you to understand the difference between posts and stories and reels. And I hope I've done that. I hope in this session, I haven't confused you too much. And I hope in this session, you found it useful to see the difference between the posts, the original way of posting onto Instagram with images or with video. Then there was the introduction of the short life posts, which were stories, and stories designed to last for 24 hours, but they can have a longer life when you recycle them into what are called highlights. And highlights, so go back to my own profile here. You've got the highlights, row of highlights there across the screen. So highlights are another way of creating content that people can engage with. People often use highlights as a way of sharing news about their business. You know, it's effectively, if you think of your profile on Instagram as a bit like your website, then you can have highlights that talk about the various products that you sell, or the various services that you provide, or about. You know, think of your about page on your website, where can you create some about highlights, and things like that. So highlights can be a useful way of sharing information in an interesting and fun way, as opposed to just what you'd see on your website. So posts, stories, and then finally reels. And we looked at reels. Reels are the newer form of post, just to confuse you. They are video. They are typically have an audio track. They're being preferred by the algorithm right now. Which is the best one for you? I can't answer that question. It depends partly on your audience. It depends partly on your preferences as to what you want to be creating. The best way to find out is to start using all 3. Before you even do that, I highly recommend that you spend time looking at the sort of thing people put into posts. I'm guessing you're probably quite familiar with posts. You've been using Instagram for a while. You may be quite familiar with stories. You may even be familiar with reels, but if you're not familiar, then spend some time, commit some time to actually looking what other people do, see how they're using them, be inspired, take ideas from other people, look at something and think, actually, I could do that. I could take that idea and I could use that for my own post or story or reel. Please, my personal request there will be, don't be boring on stories and simply share posts into stories. You can also share reels into stories as well. Don't be boring and just do that, because that's to my mind, that's not really the most effective way of engaging with people. That's the sort of thing that people will skip past very quickly. You know, if you've created a boring post and you put it into a story, it's still a boring post and it becomes a boring story. So don't do that. Think about stuff that's actually going to engage with people, and also think about the logic of it. It was, well, what's going to make people come back to my stuff? What's going to make people actually choose to follow me? What's going to make people take that next step of actually getting to my website, getting in touch with me, something like that. On that note, actually, what I didn't mention about stories, and this is the one big feature that's in stories that is not on posts and is not in reels, is the ability to add a link to your website. Now, on your profile on Instagram, you can put one link. So typically people put a link to a specific page on their website, or they might use a tool like your Linktree, which allows you to create a whole series of different links. But you can only have that one link from your profile. And historically, it's been difficult to get any other links out of Instagram. You can't put a link into posts, you can't put a link into reels, and you couldn't put a link into stories until quite recently. Well, you could put a link in stories if you had over 10,000 followers, but a lot of small businesses don't. So now you can put a link into stories, and it's just one of the other sticker options that you can use. And in fact, there's a short video explaining how to do that on my YouTube channel. If you want to find me on YouTube, just search for Andrew Knowles Explainer, and you should be able to find me. It's a relatively new channel, so there's not necessarily a lot there. In fact, if you're watching this on the video, then on the YouTube, then you already found it. But for those of you who are live right now, you might want to do that. So it's Andrew Knowles Explainer on YouTube, and I've got various little how-to videos there, particularly around Instagram right now. So little things like how do you add a link to a story. So that's the end of this session. I hope that's been useful. I've covered the difference between posts and stories and reels. I trust I haven't confused you. I hope I've given you some slightly better insight into the three different options. And feel free to ask me questions. You can ask me questions here in the chat. You can ask me questions on YouTube. You can get in touch with me, say at Andrew Explainer on the various social channels. It would be great to hear from you. It'd be great to get your feedback. And I'll be posting this video on YouTube within the next 24, 48 hours or so. So thank you for being part of the session today. Thank you for watching this on YouTube, and I hope to see you again sometime.